Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ NV, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got some special guests joining us this morning.
Who we got?
We got the brother Jordan Cooper.
That's right. And Marvette Brito is here.
Marvette Brito.
From the hit Ain't No More.
Yes.
Ain't No More.
Yes,
Ain't No More. What is it?
Ain't No More.
That's it. Ain't no more.
Ain't No More.
6 or 11 Tony nominations this weekend.
6 Tony nominations.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's wild. It's one of the most Tony nominated plays of the year, which is crazy.
Tell me about the emotional journey, right? Because Ain't No More should still be on Broadway.
Yeah.
And we can get into the politics of why it's not, right? But then you turn around and now you got 6 Tony nominations.
Yeah, it's wild. It's really wild. You know, really what it was for me is like we fought so hard for that show, and everybody fought so hard, but y'all fought so hard for that show. The way I appreciate the way that y'all came out as well, and really I know Lena hit y'all up like how could we make this work, and Will and Jada and Tyler and Shonda, and even more than that, like just the way the community rallied around this play. Black folks rallied around this play in a way that I've never seen in commercial theater or ever on Broadway. But those were dark times, you know, for me, as much as they were beautiful in the community aspect, because it was like, dang, you know, you fight so hard to get here, and then you realize that the system's not necessarily built for you, which you kind of know, but you kind of like hope that, maybe it's going to be different because they recognize, you know, that we need
So what
to
happened for people that don't know?
Yeah,
you know, because Charlamagne and I got calls. It was around Christmas time.
Yeah.
And you guys were on Broadway, and they were saying that, you know, they were taking you down off of Broadway. And what was the situation? What happened? For next time, you gotta come up early. So we gotta set up the plan. You know what I mean? So we can help from the start, opposed to helping when it's issues happening. But so tell the people what happened with the play.
So basically, Ain't No More is this play basically about what would happen if all black people got on a plane and went back to Africa. Right? It's a black ass. It's a black ass show.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the palatable black for most people. It's like sitting in your kitchen living room, like we gonna say what we want to say kind of show.
Right. Phenomenal play, by the way.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And what was wild was, you know, I've been working since I was a little kid, you know, putting on shows in like living rooms and in churches and in rec centers, and like I always did the thing. Even when I moved to New York, I would like stand in Times Square handing out flyers. So like I'm used to hustling for my work. But what I did not expect was, you know, all that time you work to get on Broadway. That's the thing for theater, right? And then you get there, and I thought that I could just focus on the work being good. I thought, I could just focus on making the best thing possible,
right.
But I don't necessarily have that privilege. So when we think about Broadway, a lot of people have an immediate thought in their mind. They think Lion King, they think Wicked, they think Hamilton, they think these shows that aren't necessarily built for us, right? And really what Ain't No More was a show that was for us, by us. And the marketing system in Broadway doesn't necessarily know how to get to us or let us know that this is a piece of work for us. I always say the same way that the government is strategic about where to put a liquor store and a prison in a black neighborhood, the arts has to be specific about saying, hey, this is happening and it's for you too, and you can come. Because a lot of folks think that it's because we don't have money. And I'm like, no, we got money. I know folks who will spend $2,000 on a bottle in the club that they can't even take home. But we don't know that we're allowed there and we're actually going to have a good time. You know what I mean?
But let me ask you a question. This is going to sound a little crazy.
Yeah.
But does Broadway matter that much? And the reason I say that is, you know, we have Harlem with the Apollo. We have King's Theater in Brooklyn. We have theaters in Queens. Does it have to be Broadway? Because if it's good, our people are going to come.
I'd like to hear Marvette's take on that.
You want to talk about that?
Well, I think Broadway historically has had a level of cachet, right? It's had a level of aspiration built into it. But you're right, and that is what we did. We redefined Broadway because we brought in a model that Audra McDonald said to me the other day. Everyone is going to fight for their show. Everyone is going to market their show the way Ain't No Mo basically showed up and marketed and fought for their existence, fought for the self-expression. But you're right, Envy. It isn't just Broadway that we need to redefine as we stand in our blackness. It's every industry that we need to redefine and not be happy to be a part of a system, but create new paradigms and new systems that will be led by the cultural fluency that permeates our culture, right? So we are responsible for the contagious adoptive behavior that we see spread globally, but we're always, consumers of it.
Yeah.
Right? And not actually owning the IP, not actually creating. And part of the problem is that the real estate on Broadway is owned by 3 families.
Yeah.
Right? And so until we start to own real
Exactly.
estate on Broadway, a lot of the decisions around marketing and actually what plays come in will never change.
So,
and
also-
for us, to Jordan's point, but there needs to be a duality. So yes, there is aspiration because the real thespian wants to say, I did Broadway.
But let me ask you a question. So with Ain't No More sold out every night. It was always packed. So why couldn't it continue on? That's what I didn't understand. Because it's not like it was like only 5 people in the seats and you understand, right?
They don't really want black people there.
But since
Right.
it was sold out and it was, packed every show and you got the celebrities, you got the press. So what was the problem of not having it back?
It's 2 things. One is advanced ticket sales, right? And there was a problem with the tickets were up and then the tickets went down. So there was a thing that happened when all of a sudden people started buying out tickets. Then all of a sudden the advanced ticket sales went down. So people couldn't buy for the future. They could only buy for this, right? And so when they finally went back up at the last minute, it's like, oh, well, you don't have any advanced ticket sales. It's like there's systems put in place that don't necessarily work for us, right? Specifically, like with a show like Ain't No Mo, what was confusing about it is that in those final 2 weeks, people were selling it out, but we just didn't have the money in the future to sustain the project because Broadway works at a weekly cost. So whatever your show costs, you have to make that a little bit more per week, right? And the thing is, I kind of want to go back to that question that you had about why Broadway, right? Because that's a very passionate thing for me. Because I'm a Broadway kid. I've always loved Broadway, and I've always loved Chitlin Circuit. I've always loved TP, Tyler Perry stuff, and Jakaris Johnson and David E. Talbert and Sister Cantaloupe and all these people who are pioneers of Black theater and don't get the credit that they deserve. Specifically, I don't believe that Black people have to be delegated to one thing. I believe that we can own it all. We can own it all. We can own a theater on Broadway, and we can own the King's Theater, and we can own the Apollo, and we can own all these. We should be able to have a wealth. I never want a Black child to come into this world and tell them where they can't be or what they can't do. And I think that we forget that Broadway is ours too. We've been taught and trained that we don't belong there because the work doesn't reflect us. But when we think about shows like Shuffle Along, which happened in 1921, that was an all-Black play with all Black creatives. And it was one of the first traditional musicals on Broadway ever. And a lot of composers like the Gershwins and people like that who created what considers to be the classics, and Rodgers and Hammerstein was considered to be the classics of Broadway that built Broadway, stole a lot from Shuffle Along. They stole a lot of melodies. They stole the syncopated rhythm. They stole the dancing and the storylines and they stole all these things, not just to steal it, but to be like, oh, this is what theater can be. Bet we're gonna make that, right? And I think Black people were taught that we don't belong. I will never pay $200 to go into a space where I cannot be liberated. I would never pay $200 to go into a space where the minute I make noise, you gonna turn it back and look at me like I'm crazy. When it's like, Negro, I paid $200 to be in here too. I'm gonna have a good time. I'm gonna talk back to these actors. And that's what Ain't No Mo was. Ain't No Mo was you gonna come in here, you gonna talk back, we gonna talk, we gonna have a good time. Every night was different because I got to just talk to the audience. It was free. And you know where I learned that from? Who we don't give enough credit, because I think we don't give Tyler Perry enough credit for what he did for theater, because I think Black people expect him to be something, but it's like, yo, he was the only one doing a thing at a high level at a time, and I think because he was the only one, a lot of Black folks projected what they wanted onto him, and it's like, you can't ask, that's so unfair. When you think about somebody like Steven Spielberg, right? You can't expect Steven Spielberg to make the same work as Adam Sandler because they're two different people, and they both make great work, right? So I think we were placing this thing on Tyler, but what Tyler did to me as a child watching those plays before he ever got to Hollywood was, there are no rules. There are no rules. You could just be Black. You could just be yourself. You could white outside of the white gaze. And I think that Ain't No Mo had a hard time getting marketing because it was writing outside of the white gaze. It wasn't here to make people feel comfortable. It was here for Black folks to leave their respectability politics at the house. This ain't a Raisin in the Sun. You gonna come here and we gonna have a good time, and white people might not understand what's going on, but we gonna have a good time.
That's right.
And I think that was new. That was different. That was something that they didn't really know how to market. All they really know how to market to is Bette Midler and Hello Dolly. And my audience is not necessarily the same people who want to see Bette Midler and Hello Dolly. And I think that for me, what I learned, my biggest learning lesson was to never lose that hustler that was inside of me when I was 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 at these rec centers, at these buildings, because I thought, oh, Broadway, I don't have to stand in Times Square no more and hand out flyers, right? But the reality is I still got to stand in Times Square and hand out flyers. I got to do the work. I can't depend on these institutions. And then more so than that, you know, the blessing in it, because I remember you came to me and you told me something that stuck with me. You were like, brother, don't let this get your head down, because this is your hero journey. Mm-hmm. You were like, this is just the beginning. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that was beautiful to hear and hard to hear at the same time, because you're in the midst of like all these people are coming out to support you, but this thing that you built for your people can't last because your people don't know about it, right? Yeah. And I think what hurt was that it closed, and this is how God works, because he may not come when you want him, because I wanted to keep going on Broadway, but that wasn't my purpose. That wasn't that show's purpose at that time. That show's purpose was to raise an alarm for what's wrong with Broadway. That's right. Right? And I think that as sad as I was, because I didn't get what I wanted, it didn't come out how I wanted, even though the critics loved it and everything, but it didn't come out how I wanted, yet the game wasn't over. So when those Tony nominations came out on Tuesday for a show that only had 53 performances, people were shocked. I was shocked. And that's when I was like, oh, God, I see what you're doing, because that's what impossible looks like. And I think that's what this journey has taught me. It's like, yo, don't ever tell yourself what's impossible.
And today's important because they're voting today, right?
Yeah.
So who votes? So people understand how the voting process works for, you know, possibly you getting a Tony.
Yeah. So it's really dope. But it's the people who are voting are basically like actors, writers, musicians. Kind of like the same thing with the Grammys, same thing with the Oscars, where it's like you have people who are like in the industry.
Your peers.
Yeah, peers, or like sometimes tourists. They have like over 800 voters. So I don't know. We gonna see what happens. I know most of them probably didn't get a chance to see you. That was another thing that was crazy about the Tony thing.
Because you was only on it for 53
Yeah. So it was
shows,
like, so nobody expected it, because they were like, I don't know if anybody got a chance to see it. So when those nominations came out, like we have the same amount of nominations as Leah Postad by Time Stopper, which is a Jewish heritage play that's been on Broadway for about a year now. And we were only on Broadway for a couple months. But we got the same amount of Tony nominations, which is wild.
Congratulations, brother.
Thank you, man.
I wanted to ask you something, man, because you know what you said is true, because I wasn't even aware of the issues that black plays were facing on Broadway, and I was having a conversation with some people from Black Theater United last Friday, and the question I had for them was, what's the point of having the Ain't No Moles, the Strange Loops, the Top Dog Underdogs, these black plays, if they're not going to support them the same way they support everything else on Broadway? What's the point of even having y'all there in the first place?
Yeah. I think it's to really. It's really to show that we're here and we're here to stay. The problem with saying that we're here is there's no strategy behind we're here. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful to say we're black and we're bold and we're on Broadway, but it's like you got to figure out how to get to the black and the bold folks in the tri-state area and around the world. Because black people will travel for something they want to see.
They got to know about it.
Exactly. They have to know about it.
And that's the sad thing. Some of those plays that you name, you know, the only reason I heard about it was because you told me you went.
Right.
But if you didn't tell me you went, where would I hear about it? Now, you talk about some of the other plays, whether it's Lion King, whether it was Spider-Man back in the day, whether it was all those plays that I took my kids to see, is because they were all over TV. Exactly. They were all over radio. They were all over billboards. And you say, oh, I would like to take my kids. But, you know, us as a community, we have to get together better and say when you have a play that's coming out, come up beforehand, allow us to talk about it, allow us to screen it in place so we can describe it and talk about it, so we can help your journey and help what you're doing, because that's the reason why we up here, is to, you know, to make sure we help each other.
Exactly. And the problem with that was, what was hard in the beginning for us was because, you know, I created the Miss Pat show, I executive produced it, I directed it.
How long did we have you before that show popped up? We had you mad times up there, right?
I've been here like twice.
Even on the red carpet. Remember, I pulled you on, but that's
what's crazy. I saw Ain't No More like 4 years ago.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
Wasn't that?
And that's
about 4 years ago?
Yeah, it was like four. Yeah, it was about 4 years ago when we had that reading. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But that's the thing, is like what was hard for us was that, which is hard for a lot of people on Broadway right now, like the reason why shows that are like Spider-Man or like Anne Juliet or like things like that, the work is because they have IP that people recognize. It's like, oh, there's a song by the Backstreet Boys, or oh, this is a Spider-Man, or oh, this is this, or oh, this is that. When you like are like just presenting like new and original art, you know what I mean? People don't really know who you are. So they're like, I don't know if we gonna give him no PR time. I don't know if we gonna give him no, you know what I mean? Because it's like, the sad thing is like, people like will pay tens of thousands of dollars to go see Denzel Washington in a play on Broadway. That's all it takes. But it's like somebody had to see Denzel in a Soldier's play before he became Denzel in order for Denzel to become Denzel. And I think that we got to learn to like take risks on names that we don't necessarily know and titles that we don't necessarily know. Because if we don't, then we're going to have Coming to America the musical on Broadway.
That's right.
Somebody going to make Coming to America the musical just because I said it right now.
You should have said that one.
She's your queen.
Marvette, as a brand strategist, you came on as an executive producer of the play, and what did you see that they weren't doing marketing wise?
Well, for me, Lee Daniels and Lee is our hero of this project, the masterful Lee Daniels, the mighty Lee Daniels. Lee and our journey started with Monsters Ball, and so you know when I met Lee, I was told that there was no room for a black gay filmmaker in Hollywood. Literally told that, and I thought, well, okay, then I love a challenge, and let's see. Let's see if there's room, and because I know for us, it's about as believers turning the impossible and making it possible, and so I saw in Jordan what I saw in Lee when I met Lee, someone who wanted to make art that would redefine, that would not be easily and readily accepted, that would shatter some boundaries, and while people didn't always agree with the type of art that Lee wanted to make, I thought that he deserved a space to make it, right? And so when I first met Jordan at the Public Theater, I saw the same attributes. But I think for Lee is a filmmaker, obviously first, and really presented this project. But for him, it was about relying on the system and the culture of Broadway as it had been to support this project. So I came on board late. I came on board when the show was 2 weeks from opening. And that's when I did forensics and said, well, I read the script, but why is there an airplane? This isn't Soul Plane. So the marketing was not right from the beginning, because for me, your visual identity speaks before you do. So for us to see an airplane, it didn't go into the depth of what the content was. So it was really about recalibrating a project that was 2 weeks from opening, that needed a much deeper level of investment as it relates to advanced tickets. So we were drinking from fire hoses from before we even opened, right? It was already like trying to keep up with everything that we were dealing with, but I knew the art would not be denied. So for us, you're right, Envy, it is about understanding, because I always say to talent, the work really happens when you get off the stage, when you leave the studio. It's not just enough to just be focused only on the art or to only rely on your team. You've got to start asking questions. You've got to start understanding that you need to understand the process that goes on behind the process, because some people are just relying on teams or relying on infrastructures to work for them. And for us, we knew, and this is my 4th Broadway play. The same happened with Trip to Bountiful. Cicely Tyson called me in and said, "Where are the church folks? I need to see the church people in this audience. I need you to reach them." When we did Eclipse with Lupita, when we did Romeo and Juliet, it's always, because for the infrastructure of Broadway, it's just real estate for them.
It's all real estate. They don't care about marketing. They don't care about who's in the audience. It's all about what building you have and how many tickets you're selling. So they don't even care about reaching us in that way. It's really on us. There's no infrastructure for that. So it's like we kind of got to do the grassroots thing, which is like what we did with Ain't No Mo, which was basically I wrote a letter, a call to action saying, hey, y'all, like we say we want new original black content that represents us, right? So it's like when those things come out, we have to support it, in the name of everything that came before us, in the name of every ancestor who we try to forget when we say Broadway ain't for us. You know what I mean? They literally built it, right? So it's like literally having to tell people, no, we're here, we belong here, and we need y'all to show up. And when I tell y'all we showed up and we showed out. Like, it was wild. Like, lines all of a sudden were like wrapped 3 blocks down the way. You know what I mean? For black folks who were like, nah, like this is actually some good shit, and we want to watch it, and we want it to be here.
So is it systemic? Is it more so business, or you think some type of systemic racism?
It's both. It's
Okay,
both.
okay.
It's both. There's the business aspect where it's like business is business, and there's also the systemic racism in the sense of like it's never been for us. If there were no white people in the audience, I guarantee you there would be a system in place in order to reach white people. You know what I mean? Like that's they just don't know and they don't necessarily care. It's like it's just about you know what I mean? Who's showing
I don't want to cut you off, but we need to get this up to date because I want hopefully somebody who's listening out there that might not have seen it is thinking about voting. We want them to make sure they vote for you, so we want to get this up now. So how can people follow you to see what you're doing next to make sure that they support you because you put out some great work and they might just want to follow your journey?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram at Jordan E. Cooper, all one word, Jordan E. Cooper. You can follow me on Twitter, same thing. You know, I'm always posting what I'm up to. The Miss Pat Show, we're working on season 4 once we get past this writer strike. Because there's a lot of writers right now who can't pay rent. So we trying to fix that before we get back to work. But yeah, so I'm working on that. I got some new plays coming out. I got a film coming out. I got stuff moving. So always just follow me and you know, I'm always about
and keep us in the loop.
Yeah,
I will.
What's
the future of Ain't No More though?
You know, we trying to see if we can film it. I want to film it so that way it's not like we're trying to get back to Broadway. Because I've been asked that since the Tony Awards. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it needs to come back to Broadway. It should be back on Broadway." But I actually want people who don't live in New York and can never get to New York to be able to see it. So that's my goal is to
get a movie.
I mean,
I got to ask one more question.
Yeah.
About the character Peaches.
Yeah.
Because you know what made, like right now everybody's having these conversations about drag queens all throughout the country, and it's like, how do you feel about that? And you were doing this before. It felt like it was a conversation the way it is now.
Yeah. Peaches. So Peaches kind of came from this idea of like I was fighting a lot of internalized homophobia. Like I was raised in the South. So like I had my own kind of thoughts about what queerness was and how it should present. And so Peaches writing it was really an exercise because it was this idea that like, oh, black people are all leaving the country, but what if they had to depend on the blackest, queerest person possible in order to get them to Africa, right? And those conversations really stirred up a lot within me, and it really stirred up a lot within the character because this character, when you meet the drag queen, when you meet her, she's saying that she got beat up the night before by these black dudes who like didn't like the fact that, you know, she was dressing as a woman and that, you know what I mean? And this idea that like, you know, black folks want you to stay in this box, right? Of like what blackness is. But in reality, I've been saying this to a lot of people don't like this. But when we don't fight for all black liberation, we are literally working in the lane of white supremacy. Because in order for all black people to be liberated, you got to be fighting for all black people to be liberated. We are handed a white hood, a KKK hood from the time that we are born. Because we are trained to hate ourselves. We are trained to hate our hair. We're trained to hate our lips. We're trained to hate our nose. We're trained to hate ourselves. And so we have to constantly do that work to undo that hood, to take that hood off of ourselves. So when we say we fighting for black liberation and black folks' freedom, we got to fight for black folks who are queer, who are trans, who are gay, who are straight, who are drag queens, who are not. Because it's like, really, if you black, baby, we got to go to keep our eyes on the prize, because that's exactly what Willie Lynch wanted. When Willie Lynch wrote that letter and had them white people hang us and divide us, that is division. So when we're not supporting all black liberation, it is white supremacy. And that is really what Peaches' a purpose is to show what happens when we don't stick together and protect our own. Because when we don't protect our own, we're not protecting ourselves.
Why did you choose the drag queen? Because it's the loudest out of everything.
Yeah, it was the loudest. I wanted to choose the most liberated. And when I talk about liberation in terms of queerness, it's really like I'm gonna present how I want to present, and I don't give a damn how you take it, right? And so Peaches is one of those people. It's like this is how I live. This is how I want to come to work, right? And so what happens when this drag queen is in charge of getting these millions of black folks onto the plane, when it's like there's already a lot of internalized homophobia within the black community that we really don't understand. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't really. A lot of people think that it's new. Right? A lot of people think this is some new shit that white people gave us and da-da-da-da. I'm like, no, you acting like niggas wasn't fucking in Africa. Come on now. If you don't think they was fucking in Africa, you don't understand humanity. Okay? You don't understand the human body. So don't be coming over here talking about the slavery just put... No, You know, it's like, no, what was happening was the bucking, the buck breaking. That was happening, just like the master was going in Grandmama's shack and tearing that thing up at night, right? And abusing her and raping her and murdering her in a lot of cases. So it's like, that's a part of our history that happened when we got on this soil, right? But let's look at some of the first recorded like queer documentations happen in Egypt. Like if you look at, there's some tombstones, I don't remember their names, but it's like these two servants like who were buried next to each other, and that was a symbol of like they had a relationship. So it's like we're in this time where it's like we really gotta like realize that we gotta love each other, like straight, gay, queer, but whatever, trans, whatever it is, we gotta love each other, because otherwise we are being distracted from getting to the prize of liberation and freedom and justice for all. You know, if we're not fighting for justice for one person, we're not fighting for justice for anybody.
And Shar, a big part of the art, as you saw in that character, and that's what I think resonated with not just blacks. There were Asians crying outside that theater. There were white people crying outside that theater. We did not get these Tony nominations. The most Tony nominations, you know, of a play nominated this season, tied with, as you said earlier, because only black people came in and supported and it resonated with them. There was a piece of a person's soul that was found on that stage. There was a piece of a person's truth that was found on that stage. This art emancipated people in ways that I have not seen art do in a long time. And that is what has resonated. The fact that he used a character, because even in our community, there are some sadly, some hurtful truths that we have to face in order to be emancipated from the pain that really has been sent, like he said, to keep us in bondage, right? Just the simple value. He chose someone that we typically don't always place value on, right? To be the very person that is the gateway to your freedom. Because that is how emancipation works. Most people are stuck in their circumstance because they won't go through the very person who they see as a reflection of pain, or as a reflection really of even hate. Their purpose is on the other side of that. And that's what Ain't No Mo really reflected. In Black, you saw all the different characters that Black went through, all the different layers of blackness, because we can't show up as our full selves oftentimes because we're afraid of how that's going to be received. But I believe in what I've been able to do and all the history I've been able to make, even with this play, is we said we're going to be authentic. We're going to go out on that stage. He's going to pour his heart out. He's going to talk to that audience. He's going to tell them that we are failing and we need your support. And they showed up. And so often on the other side of purpose is we're just really waiting. God, I believe, is waiting for you to be who he birthed us to be. He gave us that stage. And he said, don't go out and do anything other than the art that's in your heart. And we did it. And we believe that we will be victorious. And again, you know, we all, Jordan and I prayed. That's the thing about this cast. We prayed and we knew that God placed us there for a purpose bigger than selling out. This was about saving souls. This was about really saving souls in ways that only art oftentimes can, because it tells uncomfortable truths that people aren't willing to face.
And what's wild too is that, like, I sometimes, you know, because of the way everything went down, I think I'm living in my own kind of bubble, so I don't really realize the impact that show had. But like, I can't go anywhere now. Like, I'll be at a bar. The other day I was at a bar and this woman came up to me like crying in tears, like saying how much that piece changed her life. You know, because it's like that was the reason why I only put one queer person in the play, to like make that point, but also like why there's such a vast variety of blackness in that play, like from like straight black, like it's specifically what she was saying, the scene with the blackness. There's a scene basically where it's like this bougie family who doesn't really acknowledge their blackness because of the pain that's associated with it. Their dad was like almost lynched at one point in time, so he trained them not to acknowledge their blackness. He trained them in order to be successful, don't be black, right? And what happens in the scene is this family's deciding whether or not they're getting on the final plane out of America, and then all of a sudden their blackness bursts from the floor because their dad locked their blackness in the basement so it can never come out, and their blackness heard about the flight and is like, get out, we gotta go, because America don't. Crystal Lucas Perry, who's Tony nominated from that role, she is like phenomenal. Everybody in that cast is phenomenal. You know, Ebony Marshall Oliver, Shannon Metesky, Marshawn Davis, Fedna Jaquette, like everybody just like poured their hearts into that piece, and you will see yourself when you sit in that audience. It was so interesting too to like hear some black people who were like offended by like the use of the word nigga. Like they were like, because they're not used to going into a Broadway theater and hearing the word nigga, right? And what was interesting about that is they would like come up to me after and be like, yo, this is dope, this is great, this is for us. But like, why you had to like talk like that in front of these white people, right? And for me, my answer is I never wrote it for white people. I never wrote it. If for me to write it for white people to feel comfortable in that space would literally be me writing it for white people to eat, right? And I'm doing kitchen table talk, and I'm just expecting you to show up to the kitchen table. I don't care who's in the audience as long as you're in the audience. You know what I mean? And I think that we have to get through past this space of like blackness, this like politic of like we can't be ourselves, we can't talk how we want to talk in certain spaces. That once again is white supremacy. That once again is lifting up whiteness as like, oh, they can't hear us say that, and they can't watch us do that, and they can't, Master can't hear us say that, you know. And it's like, nah, like bump Master, I don't give a damn. I'm gonna say what I want to say. Absolutely. And we're gonna say it bold and we're gonna say it loud because we want every generation beyond us to be able to do that same thing.
The main reason I want y'all to win on Sunday, because I need you and Marvette on that microphone in front of all them people, giving that acceptance. That's gonna be something, boy. I can't
We need to get this on this morning, so we appreciate both of y'all for joining us. We're not rushing you out, but we need to get it up today.
When y'all went through, come back next week. Why not?
Bet.
No,
Come on.
That's right.
Come on.
I love it. Jordan Cooper, Marvette Brito, thank you so much for joining us. And like you said, when you win, because you're gonna win, come on up next week. It's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.
Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.